Top 5 times Israel. Adesanya showed the MMA world he's a machine. Since Israel Adesanya joined the UFC back in 2018, he's repeatedly demonstrated why his arrival came with so much hype. Not only has Adesanya continued to build on the jaw-dropping highlight reel he started when he was kickboxing, the Nigerian star's firmly established himself as one of the greatest middleweights in MMA history. In other words, there's not too many people out there, or at least there shouldn't be, questioning whether Adesanya should be nicknamed the last stylebender. But what UFC moments in particular really showcased why Adesanya is such an incredible fighting machine? Well, let's get into it. Here are the top 5. 5. Izzy mopping the octagon floor with Derek Brunson. By the time Adesanya threw hands with Brunson back in November 2018, UFC fans were already buzzing about him. But the way in which Izzy took out the longtime contender sent the last style bender's stock into a new orbit. Adesanya had joined the UFC earlier that year and raised eyebrows in his octagon debut by putting away Rob Wilkinson in the opening round. The New Zealand-based fighter proceeded to record a tightly contested split-decision win over Marvin Vettori before outscoring Brad Tavares in their thrilling bout that July. So, on account of Adesanya's spotless MMA record, his charismatic personality and stunning striking arsenal, many were predicting that the fighter was en route to fighting for a title, or even a championship. Izzy's detractors, however, weren't so certain just yet. Vettori had already revealed some chinks in Adesanya's MMA armor by outgrappling the feared kickboxer in several exchanges. Further, at that juncture, Adesanya had yet to fight an established top-tier middleweight contender. So, for Adesanya's doubters, Brunson was emblematic of exactly the kind of fighter who could pose a serious test for the rising superstar. Not only does Brunson have ridiculously heavy hands, he's a decorated wrestler with explosive takedowns. Well, if you're a big Izzy or MMA fan, chances are you remember quite well what went down at UFC 230. Adesanya took a massive step in silencing doubts around his ability to defeat wrestlers by taking Brunson out in the opening round. The footage of Adesanya putting Brunson down with a series of nasty knees and punches has been featured in a gazillion highlight reels since. But it was Adesanya's ability to stuff all 7 of Brunson's takedown attempts, which signaled to pundits and observers Izzy was going to be a serious problem for the middleweight elite. 4. Adesanya going toe-to-toe and taunt-for-taunt with Anderson Silva. Following Adesanya's jaw-dropping win over Brunson, the MMA world got the fight everyone had been dreaming about since the last stylebender arrived in the UFC, a scrap with the legendary Anderson Silva. Yes, for months, fans had been debating and discussing what a fight between Adesanya and Silva would look like, on account of both men's stand-up skills. When it was announced the two were finally going to battle at UFC 234 in February 2019, the matchup was immediately added to many can't-miss calendars. Now sure, the fight didn't end in Adesanya recording another highlight reel finish, but it did feature plenty of edge-of-your-seat moments and memorable exchanges. In fact, Adesanya led the way in showboating and taunts, which didn't happen too often in fights of Silva's storied career. One of the fight's defining moments came right before the end of round 1, when Adesanya stopped, put one arm behind his back, and then called on Silva with his hand. How gangster was that? Especially when you consider it came against one of the greatest fighters of all time, who clowned numerous opponents over the years with his movement and counterstrikes. Right, Forrest? Adesanya ended up winning the fight by a clear-cut decision, but it was moments like that which most fans likely remember from the highly anticipated clash. 3. The last stylebender, raw-dogging Paulo Costa. Now, depending on where you work, the third greatest moment in Adesanya's UFC run to date may not have been suitable to share with your fellow employees. Although that specific moment was just one of several in Adesanya's bout with Paulo Costa, which showcased just how badass of a fighting machine he is. Leading up to their September 2020 fight, the stars had traded numerous verbal shots with one another via social media and interviews. Case in point, Costa repeatedly trashed Adesanya's physique and scoffed at the idea the champ was a dangerous finishing threat. Well, what the hulking middleweight learned at UFC 253 was not only can Adesanya finish fights, he's not shy at all about taunting his rivals afterward. From the opening horn, Adesanya had Costa's legs in all sorts of trouble with nasty kicks. By round 2, Borrachina's legs were already littered with welts and bruises, and his movement was compromised. As the round neared its end, Adesanya sent Costa to the mat with a cracking left hook, and then finished the fight with shots from above. That sequence alone caused quite the stir, but it was one more quick act by Izzy, which raised eyebrows around the MMA globe. Yes, I'm referring to Adesanya pretending to hump Costa from behind, just for a second, after the referee jumped in. An act Adesanya himself referred to as raw-dogging his rival. Not everyone was a fan of what Adesanya did, of course, most of all Mr. Costa. Following the humiliating loss and incident, the Brazilian star posted the following message via social media. "I come here to talk about the action the human trash did. The human trash did after our fight," Costa said. "I didn't see when I was down in the cage, but I saw now. I disapprove 100%. To me, this is not done now. Nobody will stop me. Nobody can stop me. I am coming for you, Adesanya. I want my rematch, and you know I'm waiting for you." Yep, it was definitely a fight and moment not too many people are going to forget anytime soon. 2. Adesanya ending Roger Whittaker's reign with a booming left. Coming in at number 2, for the top 5 times Adesanya showed the MMA world he's a monster, fighting machine, is his first win over Robert Whittaker. After all, not only did Adesanya end one of the greatest runs in UFC middleweight history with the victory, Izzy unified the titles in jaw-dropping fashion. Yes, it may seem like ancient history now, but back when Adesanya and Whittaker fought for the first time in October 2019, the latter was in the midst of an awe-inspiring winning streak. The Australia-based star had won 9 straight, and that run included victories over notable contenders like Yoel Romero, Jacare Souza, and Derek Brunson. On account of Whittaker's ridiculous toughness, heart, and well-rounded game, he was widely considered to be one of the greatest fighters on the planet. Yeah, he still is. So while there were certainly people predicting that Adesanya was going to end Whittaker's reign as the undisputed champ, the consensus was it would be Izzy's toughest fight to date. That didn't end up being the case, however, at UFC 243. Whittaker did manage to land his fair share of shots during the highly anticipated fight, but it was Adesanya who sent the decorated fighter to the deck. Not once, but twice. In round 2, Adesanya dropped jaws around the globe by putting Whittaker away with a thumping left hook. Then, he ensured the highlight clip for the fight's ending would last just a little bit longer by pretending to spray the crowd with machine gun fire. It was truly one of the more defining moments of Adesanya's career to date, and it was one of the most memorable in UFC middleweight history. 1. Izzy finally avenging losses to Alex Pereira and buzzing the MMA world with his post-fight antics. Yes, you guessed it. Coming in at number 1 is Adesanya's thrilling, vicious knockout of Alex Pereira at UFC 287, and what went down moments after, the massive, massive bout. Unless you're brand new to MMA and combat sports, you know that Adesanya and Pereira have a long track record. Way before the two ended up meeting in the octagon, Pereira and Adesanya battled in 2 kickboxing matches. Pereira won both of them, and in one case, he viciously cawed the star. More on that in a moment. So due to those wins, and because of Pereira's 3-0 run to start his UFC tenure, he was initially booked to fight Izzy at UFC 281 in November 2022. For over 4 rounds, it was looking like Adesanya was finally going to get one back from Poatan, but in round 5, the absurdly heavy-handed fighter caught Izzy with some booming shots, and it was a wrap not long after. Due to Adesanya's run as middleweight champ, and let's be honest, because he's a massive star, the UFC granted him a chance to immediately run it back with Poatan. From the outside looking in, there was a ginormous mountain of pressure riding on Adesanya's shoulders, heading into UFC 287. After all, if Izzy lost to Pereira again, for the 4th time, it would have pushed him way back in the title shot mix. In fact, heading up to UFC 287, some folks opined that another loss for Adesanya could end his status as one of the sport's biggest draws. So, when you factor all of this into the equation, there's no doubt that the bout was one of the biggest for Adesanya to date, if not the biggest. Well, not only did the last stylebender finally get one back from Pereira, he did so in a where-were-you-when style. While playing possum along the octagon fence in round 2, Izzy brutally KO'd his rival with a vicious series of punches. The finish was truly epic in and of itself, but in Izzy fashion, he took the drama up a notch further. The star proceeded to fire 3 invisible arrows into the body of the downed Pereira, taking a page from the now former champ's pre-fight routine. The post-fight antics didn't stop there, however, as Adesanya also flopped down to the octagon floor to mimic Pereira's fate. According to Adesanya, the move was payback for what Pereira's son apparently did to him back in 2017, when his pop brutally KO'd Izzy in their second kickboxing fight. While speaking to the media afterward, the last stylebender reported the following: "I'm petty, bro. I remember the first time Pereira knocked me out in Brazil, and his son came into the ring and then started to lie dead next to me, and I'm like, you cling little asshole. I'll whoop your ass if your dad don't do it for you. But then yeah, I looked for his kid, and I pointed at him, and I saw him, and I was like, hey, hey, hey." Motions like he fell just to remind him. Yep, whether you love Izzy or hate him, it's hard to argue that what he did at UFC 287 wasn't truly the stuff of legends. So, there you have it. The top 5 times Israel Adesanya showed the MMA world he's a world-class fighting machine. But what's your list looking like? Let us know in the comments. And if you like this video, be sure to like the video and subscribe to K.O. Central MMA.